Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So I missed something. I didn't really miss it. I saw it, but I was too busy making my stupid Don Lemon's voice to pay attention to it. I wanted to do this in a standalone video because it's really important. But when I went back over, I had some issues with some volume stuff, so I had to re-record some things. And I saw something that I had missed originally. And here it is. This is about X, Twitter, and, well, here it is. Okay, so before we get to that, this is the next day, Wednesday, April 3rd. I made this on Tuesday. So it turns out I'm going to be busy tomorrow, and I'm just going to put this up as a whole long video. I'm going to add some stuff about the earthquake in Taiwan and the Chinese reaction. And also, I'm going to talk about Jesus and my understanding of Easter some more, because there's some interesting comments and questions. And so I want to get to that at the end of this. But anyways, here's the part about Don Lemon's censorship thing here.
You're going to be beholden to who's ever in the White House after the election to get the deal done.
Okay, listen. So I want you to compare this to X. That's that's Elon Musk's digital platform or social media platform, and it has caused intense controversy, I should say. Do you think the digital town square? Do you think the digital town squares, any of them like these, should be owned by one person or one organization who the person owns the microphone and the speakers and the volume?
Okay, so none of those things. I mean, he's doing metaphors here, but that's not applicable. What he's concerned about here is the algorithm, which they're going to get into, and this is really key. And so, he doesn't own the speakers and the volume. He doesn't own he owns the IP and he owns the platform, and more importantly, the algorithm. And that's what he's upset about. And he's been upset about this for the last two interviews, or at least this video and Elon Musk interview. We don't know about if it came up with Monique, but this is his big thing here, right? For a guy who's no longer on CNN, he's really concerned about that.
Well, you've brought up an interesting point, and it's the only comparable private equity has to recent trades like this. So let's just go and look at Twitter, because it's only months old. Came onto the market for debt and equity syndication at a $44 billion valuation. All right, let's leave the ownership out of it for a second. Let's just talk finance.
Yeah.
It got syndicated in a combination of debt and financing at a $44 billion. If you took this platform public today, my guess is it would trade between 16 and 12 billion. So you've lost 2/3 of your money. That has not been lost in investors that are eyeing the TikTok deal. Now, what happened between when it was worth 44 billion and it's now worth 12 to 16? Maybe the market corrected a little bit, but also the new ownership started tweaking the algorithm, changing the interface with users, changing how advertisers engage with the platform. And 2/3 of value is wiped out.
So I want to comment positively about Elon Musk here, because there's too much in the truth community that there's binary thinking and black and white presentation of videos and comments and things like this, that people are either good or evil. You're on this side or that side. People want to put people in categories, but we are all compromised to some extent. We all participate in this system. We all help this system do evil things. We all, are culpable in some way or another. Some of us more, obviously, some of us less. But just because you're aware of it and you think that you're somehow above it, but you still, and based on your behaviors and habits, participate in the beastly system. We're all, it's easy to be judgmental towards people, but it's not that simple. And we don't have enough information about what's going on here. Like, are people doing what their soul wants them to do, even if it's evil? Because sometimes there's a soul that's a higher developed soul that has to play a villain. This has been documented in various places. So there's that, right? So, I try to be more balanced in my approach because, I'm not here to judge other people. It's not my responsibility. Like, it might sound judgmental, but, yes, mocking people, sure. Now, Elon Musk, like I said, he has the biggest potential to be a supervillain. I mean, more than Mr. Wonderful, who has those dead, dark eyes. He just looks kind of evil. More than stupid Don Lemon. All these other, because of messing around with people, chipping people, and the satellite thing that he's doing, some of these other things, right? I mean, he has more resources, and he's kind of creepy and whatever he is. And yet he put $44 billion of his money into Twitter. And because of his position on censorship and allowing people who were canceled on other platforms to come back to Twitter, I mean, he took a vote for Donald Trump, remember? And Trump, Trump supporters outvoted other people and other, these things. I mean, he allowed people who were deplatformed to be platformed again, right? Because he did that, these beastly corporations like Disney and these other advertisers left Twitter. Not because they weren't going to get as much for their advertiser dollar. They were punishing him for, allowing free speech on this platform. And you could say, all the things about Elon Musk and, yeah, maybe he's doing it just to be like he wants to get in with people. I mean, there's all these things. They can look at it any possible way. But if you look at just that part of the story, that's impressive because he paid $44 billion and lost 2/3 of that. Now, he might get it back later on. I mean, of course, there's a stock value. But that's a severe loss based in just doing something that allows everybody's opinion to be voiced. He's not pushing one agenda or another. And Don Lemons is obsessed with this, and these other people are obsessed with it. We'll get more into that in a bit. Right? It's their primary thing that they're upset about. And, he put his money where his mouth is. I mean, you can say the same thing about Kyrie Irving and Kanye West. There's lots of people, and again, you can criticize the way they go about it. They might not believe or agree with everything that you agree with. But Kanye West used to be a billionaire, and he's not anymore. Yay, right? And Kyrie Irving lost, I don't know, maybe $70 million in possible revenue. He lost 17 because he didn't, want to get the bloop and some of these other things. And he said that he did that because other people couldn't stand up for themselves, which was noble on his part because Mark Cuban, his new owner on his, Dallas Mavericks, said that, he cares too much about other people and these things. Like, at least that was his assessment, right? And so you have to give people credit because lots of people talk, truth or talk. Very few people risk anything personally or in any other way, right? In terms of their beliefs. And, I'm not saying they're being effective or they're good truthers or any of these things, but they've done these things where they've talked about things that are not allowed by the powers that be, and they've suffered financially in terms of their brand and some of these other things. And you have to, again, maybe they're part of the, the whole show. I mean, it's all, yeah, sure. Like, that's all possible. But also you have to, be somewhat open to the possibility that they, have a moment where they're doing something good, right? And, that's more than most people do. Let's get back into it here.
I cannot let that happen on my watch with TikTok. I have to make this transition seamless. And I have to convince the investors, including myself, that I can do it. And in order to do that, I've got to get a seamless transaction through the algorithm that makes TikTok even better than it is now for advertisers.
But
the revenue comes from advertisers.
Okay, but my question
he didn't want to hear about that. He wants to hear about censorship, Don Lemons.
is, when you talk about that algorithm, look, Elon Musk and X and whomever, I mean, it would be the same thing for Mark Zuckerberg. They control the algorithm. They can play with it as they want. They can, suppress people. They can amplify people. So my question again is, do you think it is okay for one person, one man, to be able to have so much control, to control the microphone, the speakers, and the volume? That's my question.
Well, Don.
So he's going to go on to say, Mr. Wonderful is going to go on to say that, this is business, American business. He can do what he wants. He bought the thing. He owns it, right? He spent his money, and he could do with it what he wants. Don Lemon doesn't understand that. But Don Lemon didn't have a problem with manipulating algorithms when this happened. Authoritative news and information. There are times when you come to YouTube to catch up on latest news or to simply learn more about topics you're curious about. For content where accuracy and authoritativeness are key, including news, politics, medical, and scientific information, we use machine learning and systems that prioritize information from authoritative sources and provide context to help you make informed decisions. So when this term fake news was first brought out, it was about Hillary Clinton losing the election. And she lost it because nobody liked her. She had more money. She had twice the money that Donald Trump did. Donald Trump was Donald Trump, not a, I mean, he was appealing to a small group of people, but, he didn't have much political experience. The Republican Party was not really all that behind him. He didn't have much of a ground game, the kind of things that, win elections. And yet he beat her. Now, you could say it was rigged or whatever it is, but, the unlikable factor, which has always been her thing, people don't like her, was a big part of it. It wasn't Russia, and it wasn't that there was some hacking. I mean, she had all the mainstream media behind her. She had CNN and MSNBC and even, to some extent, Fox, who didn't really like Trump, and then all the other news networks, all the major newspapers. She had all of it. She had the media. She had all these advantages, and she still lost. So they came up with this term of fake news, which meant that people now who were expressing themselves on the internet were concerned. But before it was something that they saw maybe a growing problem, but that we could influence elections and more than just that. And so YouTube came up with this. They were pressured by advertisers to clean up the fake news. And so YouTube came up with this authoritative news recommendation. They put out like a statement saying, we're going to tweak the algorithms to promote crappy CNN and crappy MSNBC and crappy Fox, even though people don't want it. And all of us experienced it, right? Because we search for specific sites. Sometimes we put the name of the site in there, or we search for specific news items with the idea that we wanted truther information. And before, that's what we would get. We would get a truther, we would get people that we watched regularly, and they gave us what we wanted. But now they were gaming their search engine to give us something we didn't want. We didn't want CNN. We didn't want MSNBC. And then if we did watch a truther video, immediately autoplay would kick in and put up something from Fox or one of these authoritative news networks that nobody wanted to watch. And none of them cried about it because what they wanted, because they were getting their asses kicked. They were getting, they were getting slayed by truthers and by alternative media. And they still are. And so that has been going on more and more so, where they are shadow banning. The term shadow banning was coined, where they were, the algorithms were purposefully overlooking what people wanted. They weren't giving the customers what they wanted. The majority of people came to YouTube to watch something other than CNN and MSNBC that had their own platforms. And we were one of the ones that built it in the first place. We were the ones that built these platforms in the first place, right? YouTube and these other alternative media, it was all, it's these Facebook and Twitter and all these alternative media sites. People went to them because they were tired of the crap that they were getting from mainstream media, which is still the case. That's not changing. And so now people are getting pissed off at the algorithms and search engines because they were giving you something you didn't want. And they were promoting things that you didn't want to see that you already knew about. Like you already, the fact that you were on YouTube in the first place, you already made your decision. You didn't want to hear CNN and MSNBC. You could just go to their sites or go to their channels, and they had their own thing, right? And they had nothing to do with YouTube or any of these other platforms, right? They were, they had their own platforms. They were themselves a platform on cable news and these other places. And this was censorship on the most primary level. And not that YouTube wasn't entitled to do it. It was just, it was pressure from advertisers, and it was all this stuff that was against, you're not giving your customer what you want. And so Don Lemons and these people cried about how they were getting their asses kicked, CNN and MSNBC, and they couldn't wait for the censorship to happen. And then Elon Musk took over Twitter, and he started to give people what they wanted. He started to allow these things to be posted and not censor them, for one, and not block them with the algorithms. And they've been pressuring them ever since, right? And the advertiser was leaving, and the devaluation that Mr. Wonderful is talking about has nothing to do with whether this is a marketable place for advertisers. It is. And Mr. Wonderful came out later on in the interview and said actually he's looking at Twitter and seeing that it's a good place to advertise because people are getting what they want and they're passionate about it, right? But you have to be the kind of advertiser that goes along with the content that people are putting up there. But people are now receiving, recommendations of things they actually want. I noticed this because I barely ever go on Twitter, but when I open my phone in the morning, I got these recommendations, and it's not, exactly the kind of stuff I look into, but they don't have enough information on me, and I don't know enough about truthers on Twitter so that they would recommend that, but they're doing a much better job than the other algorithms. And I'm on YouTube all the time. YouTube recommends things to me all the time that I don't want, and I can't find truther stuff. When I was looking for truther channels to, compare to when I was advertising, I was saying I want to advertise on these specific truther channels. I gave a list of 40 different channels, and they said, no, we're going to do machine learning and pick the channels for you. And I'm paying you to advertise MNFers, right? And so, they suck, right? They're not giving their viewers what they want, and they're not giving their advertisers what they want because they're excluding the good channels that built their network. But you hear Don Lemon crying about this through the whole Elon Musk interview, and now with Mr. Wonderful, should one guy control the algorithm? And you're not even on CNN anymore. You're trying to be one of us, right? You're on these other platforms, and yet you're still whining about it. Like you're lucky that you have a place because how bad you suck. It's amazing you even have a career. Like you're horrible. You can't compete, and CNN can't compete, right? And we saw what happened with CNN Plus. It lost, $300 million, right? Nobody watched it. They were getting like 500 views on some of their shows. And nobody watched it. No one got the app. No one wanted it. That shows you that CNN is not, valued or wanted that people would even download the app, right? The people watching it, I watch it on, cable news, and they're dying out. Their audience is literally dying in front of them. They're the least wanted audience. Audience that is aging out, right? The young people that is the primary audience has already given up on mainstream media, and that they'll continue to do so, whether they're left-leaning or right-leaning. They don't, buy into this crap anymore. And so they had to game the system to try to make them relevant, but it's not working. They're just pissing everybody off, like it's a failed attempt. But you guys know what I always say. If you're against the behavior, you're against it in all forms. Like that's one of the things I talk about all the time. When you leave comments, when anything that you say, if you're really upset about behaviors, then you're against it in all forms. Don't whine about it when it's done to you and your people, right? Like don't say, "Oh, me and my people and people like me get to get away with this." I got these comments specifically when I mocked Britney Spears, and they were like, "Oh, she's been abused, and she's so why she's broken. You're so mean, and whatever." And I'm like, "You didn't have a problem when I mocked Cardi B or Lady Gaga, or they were both abused, right? They talk about their abuse. You didn't have a problem then. So it wasn't about the behavior. It was the fact that you identify with Britney Spears, right? Like you laughed when I did to other people, and so you're not against the behavior. You're against anything that you identify with." Getting treatment that you don't like, but you're fine with the treatment itself as long as it's to the people you don't like. And so with Don Lemons and CNN and all these people, they were fine with the algorithms being gamed in their favor. In fact, they pushed for it, and they were pushing for censorship on their content. That's all they ever did when they talked about truther stuff and alternative media. But they weren't never against the behavior. But now that it's being done to them, and not even in the same way, because Elon Musk isn't using his algorithm the same way that YouTube is to shadow ban and exclude people. He's just promoting things that other platforms have been shadow banning. And so that's the whole problem with him. And all these advertisers, all these people trying to gang up on him and all these other things, it's just about that. And that's pathetic. They're pathetic. And Don Lemons, who says he's not this is his hypocrisy is off the charts, right? Let me run the Don Lemons memes here, and then we'll wrap this thing up.
I think we have to stop coddling people when it comes to this and the vaccine, saying, "Oh, you can't shame them. You can't call them stupid. You can't call them silly." Yes, they are. The people who aided and abetted Trump are stupid because they believed his big lie. The people who are not getting vaccines, who are believing the lies on the internet instead of science, it's time to start shaming them. What else? Or leave them behind. Because they are keeping the majority of Americans behind. There's nothing fake about CNN. A person who writes everything that comes out of my mouth, not everything, but the things that make sense. Susan Lay is great. I was not demoted. None of that. This is an opportunity. This is a promotion. This is
Are you guys hammered? Oh my God. Are you guys hammered?
no. Boo-hoo. Ooh, cancel culture. Think twice. Yeah, I said it. The hypocrisy is off the charts, and it is sickening.
Okay, so I want to get to the Easter Jesus stuff in just a moment. My view on Jesus, or what my understanding is, based on people asking me. But this Roz alert, I think my wife maybe sent me something by them, and every once in a while they recommend something, and I'll show you what I received. This is when I looked up what I, Twitter recommended, X recommended this to me this morning. This thing I'm going to show you here about Chinese warplanes. Reports over 30 Chinese warplanes and 9 Navy vessels have been detected around TIawan, Taiwanese Defense Ministry says. And here's a dude. They had an earthquake there. And this dude, he's rocking with the waves. So that's, there's these other various, some of these other images here. And so that happened. And then after the earthquake, the Chinese came in there. Marjorie Taylor Greene, parody. China is taking advantage of the situation. We are a couple of steps closer to World War III. I guess this is a parody account, but it's got an official check mark. Here is the news report. China sends dozens of military aircraft ships near Taiwan. It's another sign of World War III coming. So I don't have anything more to say about this, just that it's just moving in a certain direction, right? Like we're moving in a direction where World War III is becoming more and more of a possibility. Okay, so I got a bunch of some questioning comments, some weird comments, some hostile comments. Let me just go through them, and then I'll give you my understanding about Jesus. This is one I already read for my last video, so that's not it. See if this one's something. No, I read that one as well. And so this one. Okay, so they, in quotes, tell us that Christ's birth date was December 25th, which is false, 3 question marks. But when they tell us that Christ was born in the Middle East, that's not a lie? Question mark, only 1. Good job picking and choosing the lies, Paul. People are so pathetically twerpy, right? Like what a bitchy comment, right? Good job choosing the lies, Paul. And so anybody who knows me knows that I don't look at any of these things being factual. I've said this so many different times in different ways, but you could probably get a sense of the way I post things, that anything that we consider history has an asterisk next to it because human beings are reporting on it, and it's subjective to the teller of the story. The victors, the oppressors, always get to say what history is and what it isn't, right? And then other people come in with a different version, and you can see that even in something like a divorce, or 2 people are having beef with each other in a family or friends or whatever. If you hear the story told, something like Donald Trump and that woman accused him of Eugene Carroll or whatever, right? 2 very different stories. And so you're going to pick who you believe or who you believe more based on your own subjectivity and things like that. But you're never going to get to the bottom of it unless you could read the Akashic records, which, as far as I know, I don't have the ability to do and probably don't even really want to, right? Like I just don't need to know the official story. I just get a sense of things, right? But in that, and I'm going to get into this, this is a good comment to start off with, and I'm going to talk about this more later. But we know that the Druids, or at least, there's history of this. I mean, you can find any Druidic teachings and teachings of pagans and the pagan holidays that these were, there was an issue. First of all, we know that they had to convert pagans, Druidic people, and tribal people who were much similar, were very similar to Native American peoples in a lot of different ways. Some of their stories are almost identical or similar, right? Some of their like sort of sitting around the campfire stories and these things. And so they had to convert these people, very, it's a very tribal people in Africa and Aboriginal people in Africa and in Australia and the Native American peoples, they were very similar and they had a way of converting them, right? And in the case of the people in England, the people were pagan people who celebrated the solstices and the equinoxes, and that's, very common in these types of cultures. So that's, fairly believable, right? And the fact that Easter is celebrated on, Easter is a goddess Stora, and these stories, these Druidic and pagan stories that are now associated with Easter, it's clear that that's what they said. All right, let's just say Jesus died on these days. And so pretty much, that's a slam dunk, right? Given the knowledge that we have. I mean, I'm not an expert in these subjects and don't really care all that much about them. Just that I know we've been lied to. And so you have to take everything from there on out with a grain of salt. Now, the idea that Jesus was born in Jerusalem in the Middle East, again, it's 2,000 years, and they could have changed the story. There's people say that Jesus wasn't born at all, and he's really Horus or Isis, or what is it? No, not Iris, not Isis, but I think Horus. I used to have a meme about this. And it showed the similarities between the Jesus story and the, I believe it's Horus, but it was some Egyptian, a godly-like figure. And they had very, a lot of these similarities. Now, I know that the story of Moses, again, not know, but, whatever, in terms of legends, there's a story of Karna, who was the firstborn to Kunti, the mother of the 5 Pandavas, who were the heroes of the Mahabharata. And Kunti was able to summon these divine beings, like the soul of the sun and some of these godlike beings, and to impregnate her, which again is very similar to the story of Jesus' Immaculate Conception. And she tried this before she was married, and she gave birth to this baby named Karna, who ends up being on the other side, but it's her son, right? He's the eldest child of the heroes, but she's the only one who really knows this, and Krishna and a few other people. And she was an unwed mother and couldn't have a baby, and so she hid this away, and then she put the baby in a basket and sent him down a river, very similar to the story of Moses. And this happened before Judaism even existed, right? So a lot of the things that are in the Judaic religion comes from the discoveries made in ancient Indian, ancient Hindu religions, and these other religions that emanated, spiritual discoveries that emanated out of India. And they have these Vedas, they have the Mahabharata, they have the Ramayana, and these are, there's got to be some truth to these things, right? Wherever they come from. Obviously they're going to be embellished, just like with Christianity, and even maybe more so over time, because things, you ever play that game Telephone, where you whisper into the person's ear next to you, and then by the time it comes to the last person, it's a completely different word or sentence or whatever. And so that's just, that happens in real time. And so over hundreds of years or thousands of years, of course, history is going to be changed, and that's just the way it is. And it's, it's even being distorted now as we speak with disinformation. So people lie, and you just have to accept that as being a lie. But in terms of ancient Indian spiritual energy and spiritual accomplishments, I felt it by going to India and experiencing the energy that's there. And they just have, a spiritual bones to the country. Materially, it's a pit. The bureaucracy is a nightmare. It's corrupt. it's a degraded country. But some of that comes from what England did to them and, whatever happened. But there were a time where India was the center of the world, and, these spiritual teachings and the spiritual discoveries, there's still inventions that were discovered in ancient India, these artifacts, and maybe they got them from somewhere else, who knows, it's this kind of thing. But you can trace these things back to India. They're still being used today. And so India, came up with the concept of zero in terms of mathematics and some of these other things, right, that are now, have been hijacked by their cultures. And the idea of the Atman, or the soul, that, in terms of the modern day human beings, was discovered in ancient India and has been given to these other religions. Of course, other peoples in different parts of the world might have come up with that same idea of the idea of a soul. And so, it's not something you could really claim as a trademark or a discovery, but the other religions got it from India. Like, India was the centerpiece of all these major religions. The Middle East is very close to India, and there's lots of evidence that Jesus himself went to India, right? But in all that, there's a lot more evidence, and it's a lot more believable that Jesus came from Israel, came from that part of the world, the Middle East, just based in, the documentation of that. That's a lot more believable than the holidays, that those are his actual birthdays and death day. And so, it's just petty and people are just suck, But that's not let me go through these other comments now. And so there was this comment here. I love your videos. Let me just blow this thing up here. Make it bigger here, yeah. So this is to the same video on the Don Lemons where I talked about Easter. I love your videos. Quick question, though. If you say the Bible has been thoroughly corrupted, then what do you base on any of your own understanding on Jesus? Why do you believe he existed at all? Your critiques of everything like Santa, Easter Bunny are hardly devastating when the scriptures already reveal they didn't originate with the early church. Well, that's not supposed to be devastating. They also reveal that Jesus claimed to be the son. They also reveal that Jesus claimed to be the only Son of God, who came to die for our sin and rise again. That's not possible. Jesus didn't claim that, because it's not possible to die for somebody else's sin. That is a scam, right? And I'll get into that in a moment. If those accounts are compromised, then again, what evidence do you base your logical truth or assertions on how he supposedly taught reincarnation and was just another spiritual sage on his way to enlightenment? I've had spiritual experiences through the Christian religion. My mom, I prayed the rosary, and I felt some energy. It was not nearly the kind of energy that I felt when I started doing Saj Marg, in terms of God's love and just I don't want to say power of it, intensity, but it was not as profound, or not as, it was lesser than. But I still felt stuff. I had my period of, between the ages of 11 and 13, maybe I was 12, I started thinking about God. You get to a different sort of understanding of the world you're going through. Your mind's going through changes, and you're becoming a young adult. You're going through puberty. And oftentimes, you have a spiritual time there where you start contemplating God. This happens to lots of people. In Africa, they teach kids to be killers when they're 12, 13 years old. And then they become just violent killers. They take these kids from their homes and train them these various sort of organizations, violent organizations. It's a pivotal time in your development where you become sort of a moral person and you enter into young adulthood. And in our modern day culture, we don't have any rite of passage, right? Like in Judaism, they have bar mitzvah, and the Maasai, they go out and they're supposed to kill a lion or something they have these things that are rites of passage, right? And those things don't exist anymore in the Western world. And acknowledgement, true acknowledgement, not just a ritual that you go through, but some sort of thing that happens where you transfer from being a kid to an adult, and you start your adult life, right? You get these rights of being able to drink and things like that. But anyways, I went through this spiritual time then, probably from the time I was 10, 11, whatever it was. My mom was going to prayer meetings, And then, I fell off a zip line when I was 14 and got a concussion. And I caught my parents lying. I kind of lost respect for them. We used to have these prayer meetings at our house, and there was nuns and things like this. My grandmother said the rosary, and my mom said the rosary. And I think that the prayers that I feel strongly, like I can't present any evidence of it, that my brother, who really was not a godly person at all, and wasn't very sensitive to the energy in the Sajmark system of meditation that we do, and myself, we both came to this, and I think it was those prayers. I know it's those prayers had something to do with that, right? And in the Sajmark tradition, having a religious mother is a big thing. My mom and I didn't get along, but she was a godly person. And those prayer meetings and things I benefited from. And I had some spiritual experiences based in Jesus. I read the Bible and things like this. I was a Catholic, and, I didn't like going to church, but I did have some spiritual epiphanies and things. And then there's some teachings where Babaji, the second master of the system, intercommuned with all these various saints and souls, and intercommuned with Jesus a few times and had some interactions with him. And then I had this one dream where, Babaji, when he intercommuned with Jesus, he said, all these Christians are coming to me for spiritual training. And he asked Jesus' permission to train them. And Jesus said, yeah, that's great. And he wanted Babaji to take over Christianity in the, etheric way, not as a, in some material way, but to do work and make sure that, whatever. He didn't like the way that Christianity had gone with its corrupt leadership. So that's part of the story of the Sajmark system, which I have full faith in. I'm not saying you should have it, but it's what I believe. People, you're asking me what I believe, right? And to go with that, like I had a dream, and in the Sajmark system, if you have a dream of one of the spiritual masters, and Jesus is a part of the Sajmark tradition, and he's in charge of there's these 13 yatra points that your soul goes through, and he's in charge of the soul point 2, according to the Sajmark tradition, right? So he's a part of this thing that I do. And I had a dream with Jesus in it, my one dream with him. And I was walking up and I see Jesus, and I go up to him and I say, there are a lot of Christians in the light of, I was conscious of this thing that happened with Jesus and Babaji in the dream. This is not in my control, but I say to Jesus, I wasn't thinking about this. I wasn't struggling with it, and I just happened to dream about it. And I say to Jesus, all these Christians are coming in to watch my videos, and I'm talking about, some of the things I know about Christianity. And I said something like, is that okay, right? And he goes, why do you think I'm sending them to you, right? So in my dream, Jesus was sending me Christians to learn about whatever. And when I woke up, it was very, vivid. So I've taken that as permission for me to say what I know, even if it, in the Sajmark tradition, Lalaji says you shouldn't, Lalaji is the first master of the system. And he has there's almost nothing recorded from him. He had these various abstract essays and things he wrote about yoga that are really hard to understand, very advanced spiritual knowledge. You have to have sort of a background in Sanskrit, and you don't have to know Sanskrit, but just these teachings, and you have to be like a yogic scholar, not a hatha yoga, the positions, but on spiritual yoga and spirituality. And you have to understand these various subtle bodies and things, and there's just a lot of, it's like an advanced course, and most people who read the book, including myself, didn't know anything about most of these things coming into it, right? But one of the teachings that was very clear, he said, is you shouldn't criticize somebody's religion because it might be all that they can do. But what I've learned personally is that people who are devoted to their religion, they have so many defenses that it doesn't matter. And this thing that Jesus said, and I'm not really criticizing it, I'm just saying that, just like anything else that I cover here, that's a truther thing, that we've been lied to, and substantially so. And so that's my position. But the other piece to this is when you start being a spiritual person, when you start working towards being connected to God, and you start thinking about things, you start thinking about the kind of person you are and the way that you're supposed to behave. And of course there's teachings, and there's various literature you can read about this. why you're doing it. It's experiential, and it's, you got to participate. It's participatory, but you also have to, there's knowledge you get either through experience or through reading about this stuff and contemplating it. And when you start doing that, you start understanding saints and spiritual masters and why they do things and how they do things. And you understand like what's spiritual and what isn't, right? And you start understanding the ways of God. And also my experience of just seeing scammers and scamming systems and, these organizations and, that scam people and deceive them. All the work I do on this YouTube channel. So there's two parts to this. So a spiritual person would never say me, I. A spiritual person would never say I'm the only son of God. It just wouldn't. That doesn't happen. It's not for them to say, right? They can't come out and say something like that, right? I'm God's only son, and the teachings of every spiritual organization, every institution, every movement that believes in God said God's in everything and everybody. And so Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within, and that we're all children of God, and he makes reference to this. He says God's our Father, right? And when you say the Our Father prayer in Catholicism, which was, before there was a deviation into Christianity in terms of these Christian religions, Protestant religions that came from, a king who wanted to get a divorce and these things, was the original teaching. Our Father, who art thou in heaven. Again, heaven is within. So your Father is within you. So Jesus said this. These are part of his teachings. And those teachings go along with all these other religious and spiritual teachings, right? There's a religious function for the dummies, the people who are less evolved, or just people who are spiritually immature, or immature just because they're young and stupid and, being dummies. And then there's things for people who want to be spiritual. And, when I was younger, when we're all younger, religion is the best we can do. The only part of our life. We just don't have the capacity for, I guess there's special souls that do, that have spiritual evolution. And as a young kid, you think about, you do have a spiritual life, but religion is about where you are because it's aimed at a very, immature mental makeup. And it's good if that's all you can do, right? But there's something higher, which is spirituality, where you have a, internal relationship with God. And when you understand that God's within you and within everybody else, then there isn't one son of God. So there isn't that. That doesn't exist, right? And God is, isn't a human, doesn't have a human mind, even in etheric form. God isn't a singular thing. God can't separate himself. This is one of the great teachings of the Sajmark system, that God is without a mind and without an individual personality. So the way that God is presented in the Old Testament is very immature, for religious people, in the Judaic tradition. And this is, again, it's very immature to think about God as a wrathful God sitting somewhere in heaven and judging you and punishing you when you don't do. God's very narcissistic and very, demonic in the Old Testament. And that's not how God is. Again, we can never know God. We can experience God. But as we mature as spiritual people, as we're, formulating a relationship with God, we have a better understanding of the ways of God, right? And God is, in essence, the essence of love. God is without, God can't be separate from you or me or anything. God can be everything or nothing or both, right? But God can't be one thing. God can't be a dude in heaven sitting somewhere. That just, there are souls that are like that. They're higher developed souls that are closer to God, and they have their individual spiritual essence, their spiritual sovereignty, but God doesn't. And so this idea that God could have an only son, it doesn't make any sense. And this idea that if you didn't accept this only son, which is such a dickish move on the religion, to threat and bribe you and say, hey, you're going to hell if you don't accept this guy. Well, who benefits from that? Well, the religious structure, right? Then you're loyal to this religion because they're the ones who speak for Jesus. Your religion is what copyrights and trademarks Jesus and God, and they're the gatekeepers between you and heaven. They're the only ones who benefit from that. You don't benefit from it because you're like, well, all I have to do is accept this guy, then sure. And you stop working spiritually. You're just told, oh, be a good Christian, whatever that means, and just accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. You're getting into heaven. Everyone else isn't. That's all you have to do. And then you stop working on your spiritual, your spiritual evolution. So it doesn't help you, right? It doesn't help society. It doesn't help the other religions. In fact, it caused people to go out and say, all right, let's go enslave or conquer these Aboriginal peoples. Let's go conquer them, beat the crap out of them, and force our religion on them. And whatever methods that we use to do that, to indoctrinate them in our religion, and there's horror stories in every culture around the world. There's Irish horror stories, and there's Scottish horror stories. There's stories in India and the Native American horror stories, and all across the world of very heavy-handed means that Christianity used to force its religion on people, including lying about these religious holidays and things. But that's just the beginning. They used to beat the crap out of these, like Irish kids, if they spoke their native language, and they were forced to do all this. All these. It's bad, and it's a lie. It's based in a lie. So it hasn't helped anybody but the organization itself to tell this lie, and it certainly didn't help Jesus because they're putting this on Jesus. They're putting this on his. They're saying he claimed to be the only Son of God, which he didn't. That was something that the church did, and there's documentation of the church doing this and the Council of Nicaea to make him the only pathway to God in heaven. And so, it's a good deal for the religion, but it doesn't help in terms of it's not truthful. It hurts everybody else and the practitioners of the system more than anything else. And so it's just not what you would do as a spiritual person. And if you are spiritual, as you kind of understand this, you realize, yeah, that's not right. Like you just can't say I'm the only Son of God, right? I've talked about this with my own, nightmare of what's happened in the Sajmark system with this clown Daji who runs it. And he's doing things that a spiritual master wouldn't do. And there's all these people who are following him still, even though they don't like the guy because he's not likable. And they love Chargy, the guy before him. He's crapped all over Chargy's legacy. I cover this extensively. I have a whole channel devoted to this. It's a real bummer for me, and lots of people who realize it. But there's so many people who are in denial, and, they just suck so bad. Like, it's just, they claim to love this guy, Chargy, and are grateful for all he did for them, but are allowing him to be disparaged and erased from the mission by some guy who, was the rightful successor, legally and, in every other way, but he's just fallen and he sucks. And they're not realizing it. And it's turning into one of these crappy religions where they, lie and make things up, right? He's come out with some threats and things and himself, or people don't accept him and all these things, right? He's turned it into a cult. I've seen it happen in real time. And I think I've lived through it before in past existences because it feels very familiar to me. And I can say when you actually engage in some spiritual, even just as a hobby, like you don't have to be like near, it's kind of my number one thing, but, I'm not, like I've just gotten whatever about it, right? I used to be really excited and passionate about it, and I still am in my own way, but my enthusiasm isn't what it once was, and, because it's a long haul. But when you start engaging in this process, you start understanding and you start being grateful and appreciate like what Jesus went through, or what, all these spiritual leaders and people, souls who came down here and had to deal with people and had to, bring people up to a higher level of consciousness, and people just don't want a part of it. People just don't want any part of it, right? And you see, as I've evolved as a presenter here, there's a time I was frantic about it. Frantic is maybe a strong word for it, but I was really compelled to tell as many people about Sajmarg meditation because I believe it's the solution to this problem. And now I don't care about it. And I don't, if people try it and they don't like it, I'm like, whatever. Like, I just don't, I certainly can't control that. I don't want to. And I'm just over it, right? I want people to do it because I think it's great, but I know most people won't do it. And even if they do, I've seen all these people who loved it and did it for years, and then they're failing now, right? This latest test that's happened with their new master and this whole thing. And these people are way more involved in it, and they're more passionate about it than I am, and they've invested in it, and they've given some of them hundreds and thousands of dollars and their time and energy and their travel, and they've made it the center of their lives. And they're failing epically right now, right? It's hard to watch for me. And so, I understand that people are limited, and I understand that, this is a bad time to be a godly person, but, it's the way it is, right? It's just, I've accepted it. Like, it's just, oh well, right? But it's a bummer, and I'll talk about it here with you guys, but I don't expect anything from you, right? Or anybody else. But, it's information I have, and I can share it. And if you overcome your indoctrination, there's one more comment I want to get to, but if you want to overcome your indoctrination, it's very easy to see, what I'm saying here sounds a lot more reasonable than what you've been told by the religion. What I'm saying to you doesn't benefit me at all. Like, I don't care. What difference does it make if you celebrate Easter? I talked about how, like, every year, and I got it, like, I can't remember if I got it this year, but usually every year I feel something like I call the Christmas spirit. It used to be like it would snow or something would happen. I used to feel it a lot when I was a kid. And usually now it's just like I have 1 or 2 days or whatever. But it isn't something that I feel connected to Jesus, but it's just the spirit of the holiday. And there's these things out there, these conditions and whatever it is. And, I don't begrudge anybody celebrating. I liked the Easter egg hunt, and I liked hiding the Easter eggs for my kids. And, that's cool, but that's not anything to do with Jesus, right? Going to church, what does that do, in terms of connecting you to Jesus and these things? I remember wriggling around in the things called the pews as a Catholic person. And you sit and you stand and you kneel and you're trying to get, through it. But I've always had an interest in God as a, abstract concept, like as a kid and then, moving forward as an adult. And so, take it or leave it. I don't care. Like, it's not, you don't have to agree with me because I'm not, I'm not offering anything specific. But we do know that you've been lied to, right? Because, these days are obviously not the right days. And I think, more than anything else, it's that you've been told that you're going to hell if you deviate, if you leave Christianity. That happens in India, right? They have these gurus, and the gurus charge people money. They have to pay the gurus so much money for various types of blessings and things like this, and just other things. Very profitable, and the gurus are already trying to, shake you down for money, and, they have these people. And they threaten them, right? And this is part of the reason they're scared of this guy Kamlesh now. And he's made some veiled threats, some open threats, not just veiled, about what happens if you mess with the hierarchy, right? And, they're scared of it, right? They get, they're scared that the guy's going to curse them or something. So, this is like what Christians believe in. But if you understand you've been lied to, then you realize that, that them saying that you're going to be screwed over if you leave them, you might be open to something else, right? For those people who can evolve and be spiritual people, not everyone could do that. But if you could, it's something you could be open to. And I'm not saying what to do or not. I'm just saying, that could be a possible outcome. All right, so there's one more comment here. The person, I think this is a spoof comment. I'm not sure. I have to reread it. I love Jesus. I also love how you point out these things about inaccuracies of the Bible and unauthorized changes. I've never been able to fully accept the Bible because I don't know how many dirty hands have been on its writing. I hope that Jesus was married. How beautiful it would be if he had children. And the kids for losing their dad, though. Sad for the kids for losing their dad, though. Thank you for always bringing the truth to those who get upset at Paul and says, please remember, the truth hurts. So that's not the one. That was just a supportive comment. They're not always bad. Let me see if this is the one here. No, that's not it. Maybe I didn't copy it. I don't know. It was, yeah. So I guess I didn't copy that one comment. I think it's still there. Let me see if I can still find it. No, here it is. I found the thing. It's kind of a funny comment. I don't know what you're talking about, Paul. I totally have the luxury of avoiding the truth, pretending to follow a religion that's helped me, even if its corruption started hundreds or thousands of years ago. But how dare you tell me that I'm wrong? Now let me quote at you from the Book of Lies, Derp. You know. But anyways, like I'm saying, if you're going to be a truther, then you have to look at everything that you've been lied about, And if you're not, then you're not really a truther, right? You're looking for somebody to agree with your point of view in a very subjective and limited way. And, you're not looking for the truth. Like if you're a Trumper and you don't want to hear the truth about Trump being the father of the boop and, Operation Warp Speed and these things. You can't really claim to be a truth seeker. Not like that's some big claim. Like I don't get, I think I'm a truth seeker, but it's not whatever, I'm interested in it, right? But if you're interested in it, it covers the whole field of everything. And really it starts with yourself, right? It's confronting your own lies and hypocrisy. That's the only real truth that has any value. Because you can't change any of these other people. But there's this idea of constantly being able to, go after these people and whatever. All right, so let me wrap this one up here. I'm getting kind of tired. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing from the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.